Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 667. And today's date is May 14th, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. May Retaliate with Real Weapons if Cyber Attacked. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I have uploaded the Fabian Calvo interview. If you are on the X22report.com alert email system, you should have received an email, and if you signed up to the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, you should have received a notification from YouTube. I will also be posting another interview this weekend of James Tracy, and we discuss Sandy Hook and the anomalies in the coroner's report. I will also then, coming up next week, we have two other guests, Bernie Suarez, where we'll be discussing global warming, and I have Alistair McLeod, who will be on the X22 Report Spotlight. So if you haven't joined up for the alert system, or if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, go right ahead. Or if you feel uncomfortable doing that, no problem. Just go to YouTube and type X22 Report Spotlight, or come to the X22report.com site. You will see the video on the right-hand side. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, out in Greece, we realize that Greece is basically broke at this time. They had to take emergency lending from the IMF to pay off the payment, and we understand there's additional payments that are coming up. And right now, the Greece finance minister, Varoufakis, said that Greece, their debt is completely unsustainable, and Athens needs to delay payment on 27 billion euros of Greek state bond to the European Central Bank. They're admitting they just don't have the money to continue all of this. Now they're going to have to be making some decisions here. They're trying to work out a deal with the IMF and the ECB. That's not going over too well. They want them to impose, I should say the creditors want them to impose austerity on the people. And of course the government was elected on anti-austerity, so that's not going to work out. And we understand that Russia and the BRICS system, they're extending their hand, saying, listen, we will help. And right now, they're in a corner. And of course, as we know, they have the drachma designed, ready to go. And we understand there is a meeting with the BRICS system come towards the end of June. So we can see at this point in time, they're pushing it off, trying to make the payments. But eventually, this whole thing will fall apart one way or another. Either by moving over to the BRICS system, leaving the euro, and having the Russia, China help out with their financial situation. And we're going to have to watch and see how this will work with the other nations in the Eurozone. I mean, will they follow? Will the central bank say, okay, we'll write it off, no big deal, they didn't default, everything is good to go? Because as we know, they had a special little committee where they said, we will not count this as a default if they leave the Eurozone. So it seems the Eurozone is getting prepared. The IMF is making preparations for an exit, a default. And we can see right now, this is basically where it is headed. Here in the United States, they are continuing with the illusion that everything is fine. Everyone is working. There is no problems here in the United States. They're convincing everyone that jobless claims, there are none, because everyone has a job. I mean, basically, jobless claims right now are at 42-year lows, printing at 264,000. Other than April 2000, this is the best jobless claims print since 1973. How can this possibly be when there's hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs in the energy sectors of those states, like Texas? Of course, the BLS is not counting them. When more and more retail stores are closing, more companies are laying off, and Challenger Gray and Christmas, a private firm, Their information on layoffs does not match the government information. Theirs is much, much higher than the BLS. So something is wrong here. And we can see that they are really pushing the agenda that we are in a recovery. They're going all out. I mean, in Texas, their jobless claims basically have shot up since December 2014. I mean, it is really gone haywire here. And basically, it's been bouncing at the top levels right now. It's starting to normalize because there's a lot of people that were already laid off. And we're seeing that these people are just not counted at all. And we understand manufacturing jobs have been lost. Companies have been closing. People have been laid off in the mortgage departments. Retail is struggling. Major corporations, they're not bringing in the profits. So they're starting their layoff procedures. We're seeing this as we go forward, and we can see this in the consumer comfort level. This has tumbled, and this is the longest streak in 18 months. Consumer comfort index has now fallen for the 5th straight week, the longest streak of uncomfortableness since 2013. The index is barely above unchanged for 2015, with people in the South and Northeast feeling the misery the most in the last week. Well, there's been a lot of layoffs in the last week. Things haven't gotten better. And this is not just happening here in the United States. I mean, we're seeing this happen in all different countries where there's many layoffs. Stores are closing. I mean, like Canada, they announced Target was closing. 17,000 people are going to be laid off. We understand that Bombardier, they're going to be cutting 1,750 jobs. This is a continuing, ongoing economic disaster. It's not getting better. It's not improving. How can it improve if more and more people are losing their jobs? And the jobs that we're bringing back are part-time work. Bartenders, waitresses. People cannot find the same high-paying jobs in their field. It's getting harder and harder. And yesterday and the day before, we discussed retail sales, how they are down. And that's another indicator. People do not have the disposable income. When we're in a recovery, you feel it. You know it. You have extra cash on hand. You feel comfortable in your job. You know that things are going well, that you'll get a raise. You'll be making more money in the future. So you say, you know what, let's go out and purchase that big ticket item. Let's go out and purchase some goods. But we're not seeing this right now. We're seeing a decline in retail. And it's really starting to hit hard. I mean, we're going through the spring and summer months where retail, it's not that good. So we're coming off the holiday season of 2014, which was a complete disaster. And now we're going through another period of time where retail is terrible. We're going to see a lot more stores close before the holiday season once again. I mean, it's just going to completely collapse. And we're going to see that Black Friday, Cyber Monday is worse off. It feels like I said the same exact thing last year, and this is exactly what we saw. When I said retail, we're entering a period which is spring and summer, which is absolutely terrible. And when we move into the holiday season, it's going to be awful. Well, this time, it's going to be doubly as awful as it was last year. Because things have gotten much, much worse. And we understand that the system is breaking apart from everything that we've been looking at. I mean, the FDIC, guess what? It doesn't think it's ready for the next crisis. In its 2014 annual report, the FDIC points out that its whole insurance fund constitutes just a fraction of a percent of all deposits in the system, and that its reserve ratio is just 1.01%. With a reserve so low, the FDIC not only lacks any meaningful teeth to insure the system, but it actually fails to meet the minimum level that is required by law. The government regulatory agency fails to meet the government regulatory requirements, and right now it's in worse shape than the banks that it's supposed to insure. That's not a good sign whatsoever. Even more important, the FDIC, it doesn't expect to meet its statutory minimum until 2020. So basically, they can't cover anything right now. I mean, as we know, most of the U.S. banks today are just as illiquid as they were before the crisis, holding just a tiny portion of deposits. And basically, they've been taking those deposits and whatever cash they're getting from the Fed, and they've been putting it into the stock market, investing it. But the question is, what have they been investing in? Well, they're doing the same exact thing that they did in 2008. The most popular place that they invest their customers' deposits is, guess where? Mortgage-backed securities. They are doing the same. Nothing's changed. They're doing the same exact thing. Actually, the FDIC's reserves today are actually far lower than they were prior to the crisis. Because if you really think about it, back then, they had to insure everyone who had $100,000 worth of their money in the bank. Today, it's $250,000. So they have less in reserve, and they owe more. This is a complete disaster. And you have to remember, the FDIC does not cover those banks that get hit with a cyber attack. It's only if the bank fails. So if those banks get hit with a cyber attack, guess what? They will shut the banks down and they will do a bail-in. This is what they've been planning for. They knew eventually this time would come, and we're getting closer and closer. I mean, if we look today, the global debt right now is $200 trillion. The McKinsey Global Institute recently published a report highlighting the bloated, unsustainable levels of debt that have been accumulated globally and the huge risks when interest rates begin to rise again. This is why they're keeping the rates very, very low, because if they ticked up, everything just implodes. Boom, gone. With a global population of about 7.3 billion, this works out to around 27,200 of debt for every man, woman, and child alive in the world. Almost 29% of that debt, 57 trillion, has been accumulated in the relative short period since the financial crisis that erupted late 2007 going into 2008. So in 8 years, $57 trillion. The government debt has expanded by 25% since the crisis began, and much of it stems directly from the crisis. So what did they fix here? Nothing. All they did was increase the debt. This is exactly what the central bankers want, because their system is based on debt. The more debt, the better it is for the central bank. The easier it is to loot the countries, to steal their natural resources, to privatize, and then sell it back to the government pennies on the dollar. This is how they make their profits, especially with a piece of the action of all the debt when they're trading in the dollar. Because every time there's a trade for oil using the dollar, the central bank gets a piece of the action. They don't have the debt. The rest of the world does. And we can see right now, this system is set up to fail. And as the debt gets larger and larger, it cannot be sustained. And we're hearing a lot of people out there telling us it cannot be sustained whatsoever. and things are really starting to fall apart. Now, I normally don't talk about vaccines, but there was something very interesting in Florida. A Florida congresswoman, she introduced a legislation that will send chills down everyone's spine. Frederica S. Wilson, she presented H.R. 2232. Basically, it's Vaccinate All Children Act of 2015. Wilson wants to require children who attend public schools to receive every shot on the CDC recommended vaccine schedule. Every single one. It's something like 71 doses. Now, listen, we all know there are things in the vaccines that are not supposed to be in the vaccines. It's poison. And we also know that the government shouldn't be telling us what to do. If those people who want to be vaccinated, go right ahead, you're vaccinated, you're protected. And those people who decide, you know what, I don't want the flu shot, I don't want the Gardasil shot, and yes, the Gardasil shot they're recommending for women and men now, that's their choice. So those people who decide to do it, that's fine. Those people who don't decide to do it, that's fine also. But the government, the point is the government should not be dictating to the people what is right for the people. Because most of the time, like 99.99999% of the time, the government is wrong and they're lying. And we've seen this time and time again, where they tell us, no, this is good for you. Guess what? It isn't. They tell you that it's safe, it's fine. It isn't. If they want to prove it to the American people, and they always have a problem proving it, let's extract the chemicals in the vaccines or in the foods that Monsanto creates, like glyphosate and everything else. Let's put it into separate jars, and those people who are telling us it's so safe, let them ingest or let's inject them with it. Let's see if they're open to it, and if they're not, we have proof right there that, guess what? It's not safe. Because if they're not going to take it, then guess what? We're not going to take it. And it seems the government always wants the people to follow certain laws, and the government, they follow their own, or they don't follow any. And again, the founding fathers created the system where everyone had a choice. If the government is deciding for you, you do not have a choice. You don't have freedom. Your freedom has been taken away. And the government is continually doing this, telling you, you must do this, you must do that. That means they are choosing for you. You lost your freedom. You think you're free, but you're not. Not when the government is telling you to do something. Even though you disagree with it, and you still do it, you lost your freedom. And we understand that Obamacare, where they're trying to force everyone into it, you're losing your freedom to choose. Well, I choose not to have health care. I choose not to go onto your system. I rather use another system like alternative medicines. But again, they're trying to fit and push everyone into their choice and take away yours. This is what they're doing right now. And Obamacare is doing it in a way where people don't even realize it, where they're penalizing people for not having health insurance, pushing them forcefully into the system to be dependent on the government. This is exactly what's happening. But we see that Obamacare exchanges, they're having trouble. Hawaii's Obamacare exchange website is going to shut down because it's not financially viable. So basically the migration to a federal exchange away from a state exchange will now cost the taxpayers $30 million. And we're seeing a lot of states report this, that they are losing money in their state exchanges. It's not cost effective for them to keep it, and they're saying, listen, we're going to dump it. And each one, it's going to cost millions upon millions of dollars to go over to a federal system. But this is what the federal government really wants, because then it will be federalized across all the states. And this is what they're looking to do. Now, just a day or two ago, the Senate came out and they turned down the fast track procedure. And we discussed what that was, where basically Obama has full power and he doesn't need congressional oversight whatsoever. Now, they turned this down. It was a test vote, and they said, no, we're not going to do this. And of course, the corporations, the central bank, the government officials, oh, no, this is not going to fly. So it seems they made some phone calls late at night using the NSA data to blackmail those government officials. And it seems like everyone had a change of heart. And now the Senate reached a deal to pass Obama's trade bills. We were talking about this over and over in other reports, how the NSA spies on people, on government officials and judges. We saw this with Obamacare with Judge Richards, where all of a sudden he was out there continually saying it's unconstitutional, and then one day he just said it was constitutional and then left for 2 weeks. Here we're seeing the same exact thing. They didn't get the votes, and then not a day later, all of a sudden everyone has a change of heart. And you can see that this is no longer a democracy. The democracy of America is completely gone. It's evaporated. We are in a dictatorship, and if you do not do what we want you to do, we will force you to do what we want. And this is what we're seeing today. We're going into a closed, fascistic society. Now, as we know, the Patriot Act is going to expire June 1st, but we see the USA Freedom Act was basically voted on, and the House approved it. Now, they're telling everyone that it's going to basically stop the bulk collection of data, and that's furthest from the truth. This is not going to stop anything. They're going to continue with spying. There'll be no oversight. Actually, the government, they don't even care anymore. And Congressman Justin Amash was out there, and he is saying that the Freedom Act basically is not going to stop or put an end to bulk data collection. Basically, he says the bill's sponsors and unfortunately some outside advocacy groups wrongly claim that H.R. 2048 ends bulk collection. It's true that the bill ends the phone dragnet as we currently know it by having the phone companies themselves hold, search, and analyze certain data at the request of the government. So now we have a third party basically spying on the American people, which is worse in many ways given the broader set of data that companies hold. But H.R. 2048 actually expands the statutory basis for the large-scale collection of most data. H.R. 2048 does this by authorizing the government to order the production of records based on specific selection terms, like a search term used in a search engine. The records sought must be relevant to an investigation, so it's possible the court's ruling will continue to restrain the government in some fashion. No, because they will have something on the government officials, on the judge, and this will basically not stop anything. They'll blackmail them, and we can see that this is not going to work. But what the USA Freedom Act does, it gives the illusion that they're going to stop the bulk collection of data. And what this allows is for all those lawsuits to be dismissed at this time. All the lawsuits against Obama, his staff, will completely disappear. Legal scholars say at least 3 of the 6 major lawsuits against the program likely would be doomed if the USA Freedom Act passes the Senate and becomes law. This was done on purpose. They created this USA Freedom Act. Basically, they're using a proxy company to do all the dirty work. The phone companies. The internet service providers. They will be doing the dirty work of the government. So they can say, hey, we're not spying on the American people, but in fact, they really are. And this allows them to get rid of, most likely, all the lawsuits that were filed against Obama, his administration, NSA. And you can see they just took care of everything. And they tricked the American people to believe that their information is now private. And guess what? That's furthest from the truth. Your information is still being collected. It's still being analyzed. They will not stop, period. And again, they created this system which completely violates the 4th Amendment. And they don't care. They don't care whatsoever. Now, out in Ukraine, we see protesters are outside. They're gathered outside the Ukraine Parliament building in Kiev, and they're demanding the cabinet to decrease the gas tariffs. And they're saying their rally will be indefinite until it's done. Protesters are holding signs that say Ukrainian gas for Ukrainians and call on Prime Minister Yatsenyuk to stop stifling people. A guillotine, gallows, and a golden radiator have been installed on an improvised stage on the square, and the organizers of the events are playing a performance showing the people's reactions to the rising tariffs. They're telling the government they're tired of all of this. They can't pay for it. And these rallies and protests seem to be growing as time goes on. We see Washington basically has not changed its position on Crimea reunification. They want Crimea back, and they want to take it away from Russia. But they're not going to discuss this with Russia because they know it's going nowhere. So eventually what they're going to do is they're going to take it back. Poroshenko is out there once again. He's on an interview with a German broadcaster, ZDF, and he said that Russia has deployed 11,000 troops in the war-torn eastern Ukraine, adding that they can fuel separatists in the region and make them create a land bridge to the Crimean Peninsula. He also criticized the Minsk deal and called it a pseudo-peace deal, which does not guarantee any security for his country. The propaganda is flying wild. Kerry's mission to convince Russia to maybe step aside in Syria and step aside in Ukraine, I don't think worked out. I don't think Russia's going to step aside and allow the U.S. to do whatever it's going to do. And of course, the U.S. is out there saying that the United States has to follow the Minsk II, Russia has to follow the Minsk II agreement because this is the only agreement. And it seems that they are setting them up to fail. Because one small move, they will blame it on the Southeastern people and Russia. And again, the United States, they didn't sign anything. They weren't even involved. But they're making the rules. They have troops inside of Ukraine. Poroshenko, under the direction of the U.S. government, retracted the statement of recapturing the Donetsk airport. Most likely they were probably out there going, whoa, what did you just say? No, let's keep that a secret. We don't want them to know what we're about to do here. So he retracted his statement completely. In Odessa, we see a bomb which exploded in the port city of Odessa. A homemade bomb equivalent to about 400 grams of TNT went off in the Ukrainian Black Sea port of Odessa. And we're seeing a lot of these things occur, especially in certain areas where they're trying to blame it on the Southeastern people. They're saying that terrorists are planting these bombs. And what's very interesting, in Odessa, we see that Ukraine's security service and prosecutor's office have shut down the Odessa-based independent local news outlet and jailed its chief editor as well as journalists. They basically went in and they searched the entire premises, and they didn't coordinate with the Odessa police force there. They just went in and they did it on their own. And they confiscated notes, computers, cell phones, personal notes. Basically, they want to see what they're working on. And they're trying to keep the media quiet with whatever they're reporting on. And we see a lot of countries are doing this right now. They're monitoring and controlling the media because they only want their propaganda pushed out. This is why the internet makes it very difficult for these countries, because you have the new media, the alternative media, and it's very hard for them to control. So the countries are saying, if they have to do with terrorism, if they're talking about terrorism, we're going to have to block them to keep you safe. And this is what they're doing. NATO is ramping up right now. They are going to be sending more troops in Eastern Europe. Baltics are asking NATO for thousands of boots on the ground because of the tensions with Russia. Basically what they're doing is they're seeking a brigade-size unit so that every Baltic nation would have a battalion. I mean, you could see how they are moving the military assets into these locations. You can see how they're getting ready for war. Every day that we report on this, it's building up over and over. I mean, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the alliance is going to increase its activity in eastern borders with more air and sea patrols amid non-stop exercises. Why? Because of Russia, of course. And they're going to bring the total number of NATO troops in the force to 30,000. They are preparing. They are getting ready. And we understand this is happening all over the world. We understand in Japan, they're getting Harpoon 2 missiles. They're getting the Osprey. And they would like to move that base to a different location so they can bring in a lot more advanced equipment. And Miyazaki Hawaii, he is a film director of anime, and he has joined the battle to prevent the U.S. military from building the base at Henoko. And we can see this is the people out in Japan saying, listen, we don't want this. And of course the government's out there, no, we need this. We have the problem with China, rising tensions. We need to keep you safe. We need to secure Japan. And the people are saying, no, we don't need this. We don't want war. We want peace. We don't want nuclear weapons, a missile system here on the island, on this base that you want to create. They're fighting back, but guess what? The government doesn't care. They could care less. We see the U.S. government now is going to deploy the B-1 strategic bombers in Australia. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense David Shear told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, yes, because of the increased tensions with China and the concerns that we have, the United States military would like to place the B-1 strategic bomber in Australia. And if something does occur there, we have the bombers, we have the missiles, we have the fleet that is in the Pacific ready to go. Basically, they are containing China. And you can see they're provoking China in that area with the Spratly Islands. Remember, the U.S. has no claim to any of those islands there. They shouldn't even be talking about it or in that area. And they are, because they're trying to provoke. They're using Japan. They're using the other nations around that area. And they're going to be patrolling that area. where they have no claim to whatsoever. We see war being pushed. Now, out in the Persian Gulf, we see some government officials, the corporate media, they are really trying to provoke Iran into doing something. They're trying to convince everyone that they're getting ready for war in the middle of a P5+1 peace talk. It makes no sense whatsoever. But the warmongers are out there because you have to remember our government has basically been taken over by other countries like Israel, by the central bankers, and other forces in the government. And they all have their own agendas. And we can see right now they're putting out the story that Iran's Revolutionary Guard fired upon a Singapore registered tanker. And they're saying, oh, it was doing nothing wrong, and they just came up and they fired. But the article actually says 5 small boats believed to be manned by Iran's Revolutionary Guard fired upon. Now, we don't really know who they belong to. And we can see they will do whatever they possibly can to blow things out of proportion to provoke these countries into going to war. Just like they did with that Maersk Tigris ship that had a financial obligation to Iran. Of course, they blew it out of proportion. We're going to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to protect everyone. And that's not what it was all about whatsoever. The United States does this all the time where, you owe us money. We need to come and get your ship and bring you into port until you pay your fees. We see that Iran is sailing in humanitarian aid on a ship. The U.S. says you need to go to Djibouti and unload there. And Iran says, well, we're not going to let you search. We're going directly to the Yemen port because we want to make sure that people get the humanitarian aid. And what the corporate media doesn't tell you is that Iran has already coordinated with the UN to prepare the ground for the ship to dock at the port of Yemen. It is already clear to do this. And the propaganda is running wild to convince everyone that, they're not following procedures, they're not going in. But you have to remember, the U.S., they're part of this war. Why would another country bring in a humanitarian aid? Listen to the warring parties. It makes no sense to do so at this time. And we can see right now, they want to make sure that they get the humanitarian aid. And everything has been coordinated. They do have additional planes, which, yes, are flying into Djibouti, and then those goods will be transferred over to Yemen. And we can see right now, they're provoking, pushing more. I wouldn't be surprised if one of these Iranian ships does get attacked, just to push Iran a little bit more. Because we know what they want. They want war. And they're getting ready to push a major offensive in Ukraine and the Middle East. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and Jordan, basically, they're in agreement. They are together now. They formed a new war pact to go after Assad, to remove him. And what's very interesting about all this, and I've discussed this before, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they have agreed to step up deeper military cooperation and establish a joint command in the occupied Syrian region of Idlib. So they're already moving into Syria saying these are the safe havens. We can set up command centers in these areas, just like we said. This is what they're doing right now. And it's already out there, and it's being reported right now that the Free Syrian Army, that Obama, labeled moderate because that whole case came up, like, how do you know who's moderate, who's the terrorist? Oh, no, we're just giving the weapons to the moderates. Well, guess what? The entire Free Syrian Army that was in Syria basically has joined the Islamic State group. They are part of that group now because that is the proxy army for the U.S. When these men are trained, they're given weapons, and as soon as they get into Syria, they defect over to the Islamic State. This is done on purpose. A no-fly zone is being considered by the Obama administration. It will be promoted as a humanitarian intervention that strives to create a humanitarian corridor to protect civilians. Whoa, wait a minute. We've heard this before. Yes, we have. It was the same thing they did during Libya, the U.S.-led NATO bombing campaign in Libya that destroyed the country. They did the same exact thing. They set up a no-fly zone. They said it was a humanitarian corridor, and they used it to their advantage. They're doing the same thing in Syria. They are getting ready for a major offensive there. We see the Syrian Electronic Army is back. Add them to the list. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, the Syrian Electronic Army. They are reported that they are cyber attacking right now, the Washington Post. Visitors were greeted with a pop-up message containing anti-U.S. and anti-Saudi propaganda, such as U.S. government is training the terrorists to kill more Syrians, and Saudi Arabia and its allies are killing hundreds of Yemeni people every day. A message asserting the media is always lying was also one of the messages, and they signed it from the Syrian Electronic Army. Now, of course, a lot of these things where the media is always lying, the United States is killing the Yemeni people, this is done on purpose by the U.S. government central bankers. When they put out these messages, they try to discredit the alternative media, the new media, to say, look, see, the Syrian Electronic Army is putting out the same message, and you can't believe the alternative and new media. This is exactly what they're doing. This is their plan. And of course, some of the investigations suggest that these attacks are linked to the Assad government and may not be based in Syria. They might be doing it someplace else. But like we reported yesterday with Representative McCall, who said we can't track down the Islamic State because they use proxy servers. But everybody else, they have no problem tracking down. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. We know the Syrian Electronic Army is the U.S. government central bankers convincing us that Assad is cyber attacking. These other cyber attacks from Russia, China, North Korea, they didn't come from there. These are advanced state actors who know how to bounce the attack off of many servers, hide their code, mask everything. This is propaganda. So in one case, they're saying, with the Islamic State, it's too hard to figure it out. And with Russia and China, oh, that was no problem. Within about an hour, we're able to know where all this is coming from. No. They're using both sides of the story, and it doesn't even make sense anymore. We see Britain is out there, and of course the Islamic State is getting ready to attack London. It's going to happen any minute. And Britain is out there saying that, listen, we are under a greater terror threat because the European Union member states are not sticking together. And we can see right now they're really pushing this, saying, listen, we need to stick together. The EU states are breaking apart, and they're only basically protecting themselves at this point. And with this new terror attack, they're going to try to bring all the EU countries back together, just like they did it with France with an attack, Canada, Australia. They want everyone back in the mix. They don't want people saying, oh, let's remove the sanctions against Russia. Let's not go fight the Islamic State. We don't want to be involved with this. We want to help our country get back on its feet. No. You will do what we say, and you'll do it now because we're going to push you into doing it using an event. We see the former U.S. government official is saying that, hey, the U.S. is already at war with China and Russia. Top economic and political experts say we're drifting towards World War III. The former White House official Dr. Philippa Malmgren, former presidential advisor and member of the U.S. President Working Group of Financial Markets, said last December that the U.S. is already at war with China and Russia. And basically, we're already in a nose-to-nose confrontation with both of these countries, but these wars are being conducted through cyberspace rather than through traditional conventional weapons. And through cyber attacks, it's much easier because you don't have to really prove anything. You just have to say, they attacked us. And this is where the NSA chief is out there. Admiral Michael Rogers is saying, listen, if another country attacks the United States via a cyber attack, we will respond with maybe real weapons. Because it's so easy to fool everyone saying, we were just attacked. How do you prove it? Russia, China attacked us, or the Islamic State, or the Syrian, they attacked us, and we will now use real weapons against them. You can see where we are going with all of this. They really can't show you the proof. They never do. And if they do show you anything, it's basically photoshopped, made up, and please just believe us while we fire our ballistic missiles at this country or group. And you can see right now that, we are getting ready for something huge. The war has already started between Russia, China, the Middle East, in Eastern Europe. We just haven't had the big kaboom to say, there it is. They're waiting to get the green light to have that event to say, okay, we are definitely in World War III. We were just attacked. Now it's ready to go. Almost like Pearl Harbor. And I keep bringing that up, Pearl Harbor, a cyber Pearl Harbor. This is what they're waiting for to really kick it off. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.